You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News, live from COP26 in Glasgow. Today, big movements in the last few minutes as China and the United States publish a joint declaration saying they'll work together to ensure a successful outcome from the COP26 summit. 2 days to go, but still a huge amount to do. Boris Johnson admits the talks are getting tough as a draft agreement published this morning is criticised for not going far enough. Saudi Arabia denounces claims it's deliberately stalled the climate talks in an attempt to derail them as fabrications. We report from Kenya, where a severe drought in the north of the country is putting millions of people at risk of hunger. But in the city of Chennai in India, the opposite problem, as severe rainfall continues to cause flooding.
And I'm live in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where we meet the man on a mission to turn the favela where he lives green.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Climate Show, live from the heart of the COP26 summit in Glasgow, where Boris Johnson has admitted there's still a long way to go to bridge the gap between where we are and where we need to be in just 2 days' time. And after a series of eye-catching announcements last week, the focus now is on reaching consensus on somehow keeping that target of 1.5 degrees of warming within reach. Well, a few minutes ago, it was announced that China and the United States have released a draft declaration on enhancing climate action this decade. So let's find out what that means. Our climate change correspondent, Hannah Thomas-Peter, is here with me. So a joint declaration by China and the US. We've heard from the Chinese spokesperson. So how much do we know about this and how much does it matter?
Just received the detail of this statement, which is long and detailed, but I've scanned it. And this is a significant moment. China and the US saying together, and we're really listening for what the Chinese are saying about how they're going to enhance their actions to tackle climate change, that they are going to work together with the US to take enhanced climate actions that raise ambition in the 2020s in the context of the Paris Agreement, with the aim of keeping 1.5 degrees of warming within reach. That is really specific language. And the most heartening thing from America's point of view and from the planet's point of view, frankly, is that China is now saying that as necessary, it will communicate or update its 2030 NDCs. Now, in that cover agreement that came out in the early hours of the morning that we're all digging through, the crucial paragraph that's caused a ton of trouble is paragraph 30. And that is the paragraph that says that all countries must come back by the end of next year, 2022, with better homework, more ambitious carbon targets. And there was some real opposition to that from China and Russia and Saudi Arabia and others. And the US and the UK were saying it has to stay in the text because it is what will keep 1.5 within reach. Now China has opened the door to that being a possibility, to coming back with enhanced nationally determined contributions. That's really significant. They have also opened the door to agreement on global carbon markets, as saying they want to work with the US on getting that done, and very interestingly, on the transparency framework, which is the part of the Paris rule book, which we've been hearing quite a lot about, very technical detail, but it's been causing real trouble. Countries like China have been reluctant to commit to filling in the same forms as everyone else, committing to revealing targets and emissions figures and so on. So that's my first assessment of it, still reading it, but a potentially really big moment, a turning point at COP26.
And we may, of course, get more details from the US climate envoy, who is due to speak around now, which will, of course, bring everybody live when it happens. But Hannah, thanks very much indeed for that instant assessment of what's been released. Well, there have been other developments here today too, with Boris Johnson addressing the summit, as our science and technology editor Tom Clark reports.
The Prime Minister has made it clear success in Glasgow is a personal priority. But as talks enter a crucial phase, he must appeal for help from others.
It's now within reach at COP26, in these final days, we just need to reach out together and grasp it. And so my question to my fellow world leaders this afternoon, as we enter the last hours of COP, is will you help us do that? Will you help us grasp that opportunity, or will you stand in the way?
So there goes Boris Johnson to try and inject some energy and ambition into the talks here. The collective efforts of more than 20,000 people at this summit have been distilled effectively into this 4-page document. It's clear from the text this won't be the summit that solves the climate crisis, but Glasgow could yet go down in history as the place where the plan to do that lives or dies. The text is the first in the 30-year history of this process to call for a phase-out of coal and fossil fuel subsidies. But it lacks strong commitments on money for poor countries who will be needed to help keep those words in the agreement.
The historical emissions largely came out of the rich polluters. So the rich polluters are now asking the vulnerable world to help them tackle a problem that they largely didn't contribute to. And they have actually been mean with cash, and they're mean with technology. And so it's hard to see how we can allow the vulnerables contribute to help solve a problem largely created by the rich minority without the finance and without the technology.
Phasing out oil and gas subsidies is known to be a red line for states like Saudi Arabia, though they deny they're blocking progress.
Serious allegations. These are fabricated allegations.
They are fabricated?
Allegations.
It's thought talks could progress, even against Saudi's wishes. But not so China. Can its special envoy, Xie Zhenhua, accept a plan that phases out coal?
Could I ask about coal? Is the reference to coal in the text, of phasing out coal, is this going to be a problem for China?
No country will reveal all its cards early in the negotiations, but should the rules of normal diplomacy apply?
So I'm saying to the leaders who are here now, this is on your watch. Sorry, it's so important. You know, we are literally talking about having a safe future. And, you know, the elders are pressing the leaders. Understand this. You can't negotiate with science. You can't talk about a glass being half full. We have to get it down. We have to be on track for 1.5, and it is doable.
It looks certain even at this stage there's been progress at this summit. But success can only be measured against the physical realities of a fast-changing climate. Tom Clark, Sky News, Glasgow.
Well, let's take a look now at some of the day's other climate news from COP26 and from around the world. And an Icelandic glacier is melting faster than it can recover due to climate change. And just a warning that the following video does contain some flashing images. Filmed over less than 6 weeks this summer, the footage from the southeast of Iceland shows the startling rate at which ice is melting. Experts say the rapid rate of melting of glaciers during the summer has significantly hampered recovery during winter months. On Transport Day at COP26, some of the world's largest car makers, including Volkswagen and Toyota, have not backed plans for the elimination of new car emissions by 2040. China, the world's largest car market, also didn't sign the agreement, and neither did the second largest, the US. But individual states, including California, New York and Washington, have backed the deal. And despite being declared biologically dead in the 1950s, scientists have found sharks, seals and seahorses are amongst sea life living in the Thames. However, researchers from the Zoological Society of London warned the river is suffering from rising nitrate levels as a result of sewage discharges and industrial runoff, as well as rising water temperatures, which threaten the wildlife's future. In Kenya, climate change means dry spells in parts of the country are becoming longer and more frequent. There's a drought across much of the north and east of the country, with clean water now a rare commodity. It means millions of people are at risk of hunger and food prices are continuing to rise. Well, our correspondent Ashish Joshi travelled from the river Nakiria near the town of Kalakol in northern Kenya to the Nasajer Dispensary Health Centre outside the city of Lodwar. This is his report.
This is Nakaria. Even in this state, this seasonal river is a vital source of life. But its water is deep below the sun-hardened riverbed. Boreholes dug by hand are the only way to get to it. Apei Karika digs deeper and deeper. It's back-breaking work, and it's dangerous. The wells can collapse at any time. There is a drought across much of Kenya's north. Here in Turkana, the rains have failed again. The water table is shrinking. These water wells are the only source of fresh water for about 100,000 people, and the only reason they have water in them today is because of a flash flood. And this is Calicut town. It's entirely dependent on the water holes.
If there is no water in those wells, that means there is no water for the barrels. And if there is no water for the barrels, there is no water for Calicut.
Billy Kepu is an environmental activist. He tells me the rainy seasons were regular, but now droughts are fiercer and longer, driven by climate change.
For quite a number of years, there hasn't been a lot of rain in this area. So that has actually been making life quite difficult. Besides food crisis, there is increasing also need for water for the communities around.
The Turkana are nomadic herders, completely dependent on their animals. They used to call their country the land of plenty, but it's not anymore. The scrub is burnt out.
There is no grass. You can see bare and empty ground. Almost like those sheep are feeding on the soil.
We've joined the World Food Programme as it reaches rural communities hit hardest by the drought. Alice Moni is one of the young mothers who is trying to raise a family with no water and little to eat. The livestock starve, so too do the people. Malnutrition is spiking. Alice tells me her 4-month-old baby Joshua is always hungry. The land is dry and hot, she says. There is no water, and her animals are diseased or already dead. Previous droughts in this region have been catastrophic, and they can't let it happen again.
We believe that climate change is a driver of the many issues that we experience here. We are increasingly seeing the drought episodes escalating and increasing, and therefore households do not have enough of the supplies of milk and meat.
The children here know nothing of world leaders meeting to discuss their fate. But they do know each day brings more hunger and more thirst. And tragically, this is a crisis not of their making. Ashish Joshi, Sky News, Turkana, northern Kenya.
Chennai in India has been experiencing severe rainfall and flooding in recent days, destroying homes and buildings. The city is frequently hit with heavy rains this time of year, but scientists say that climate change is making extreme weather conditions more likely and more frequent. Our correspondent Katerina Vitozzi is in Chennai and sent this report.
If you can't save your home, at least you can try and save yourself. Kartik's family evacuated on Sunday after intense rain flooded their house.
How many people here? You? How many others?
6.
6 people are living here. And you're staying at the school now?
School.
He tells us the water came up 5 foot in here. Nothing was spared.
சாப்பிட்றதுக்கே இடம் இல்லை, தூங்குறதுக்கே இடம் இல்லை, ரொம்ப கஷ்டமா இருக்கு. எப்படி போறது அதுமே தெரியல. Pain.
You feel pain?
Pain. Full guard.
20 centimetres of rain fell in Chennai on Sunday. Low-lying parts of the city are still flooded and more rain is coming.
This is the fourth day that parts of Chennai have been submerged like this, and it's not just to do with the volume and the intensity of rain that's been falling, but also because of the way the city has become so urbanised. Natural soakaways have been built over, so when the rain falls like it has been doing, it's simply got nowhere to go.
Most people in this neighbourhood have already locked their doors and left. But we find one family clinging on to the last bit of dry space they have as the water rises around them, bringing filth with it.
You can see the house was filled by the flood. So they lost the house. So they're suffering a lot of. So they can't be able to sleep here and also. How many days they can stay in the government school?
For now, help is in the form of food rations. Government teams are still trying to evacuate the most at risk. At least 10 people so far across the state have died in these floods. And although officials say the rain so far isn't as severe as forecast, many are still incredibly vulnerable. Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News in Chennai, India.
Welcome to Brazil, and here in Rio, many of those who are most at risk from climate change live in favelas or shanty towns, precariously perched on the sides of the hillsides around the city. For many, there is little they can do to protect against the impacts of global warming, but one man is trying to make a difference. I met him to find out how. In a favela north of Rio, I tracked down Luis Cassiano.
Hey, man!
How are you doing?
Fine! Welcome to my greenhouse.
Greenhouse in a favela.
Come on. Come on.
If the fight against global warming begins at home, then Luis is leading it.
My friend Mark.
Very nice to meet you. After meeting his mother, the climb to the top of the house is well worth it.
My green roof in favela. Happy, 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 happy.
His roof garden is his pride and joy, plants of all sorts everywhere.
Fortuna. Medicinal, aloe vera.
To him, the battle against climate change is real because he's cultivating his green roof in the shadow of an oil refinery. And within yards of the freight trains that rumble by day and night. His aim is to create the greenest favela in Rio, though judging by the chaotic grey sprawl of concrete and corrugated iron surrounding him, it is not happening fast.
Well, I have a dream. I want very, very green roofs in favela.
Everywhere. Everywhere.
Everywhere. This is my dream.
Luis has an irrigation system that sustains life above, and on the plant-strewn terrace below, it is cooler and there's a natural shower to be had. Luis Cassiano is a happy man, but his green dream has some way to go.
Green roof favela!
Luis Cassiano there doing his bit, but Anna, the real story here is deforestation, and there remains huge scepticism that the Brazilian government will stick to the pledges they are making in Glasgow.
You're shipping these.
I didn't follow the Johnson stuff, but I only saw them.
Mark, thanks very much indeed. So let's discuss the day's events now in Glasgow. Here with me is Bernice Lee from Chatham House, who's on the UK Climate Change Committee's International Advisory Group, and Guy Platten, General Secretary of the International Chamber of Shipping. So welcome to both of you. And Guy, I'm going to come to you in a moment because today was all about transport here at COP. So we'll discuss what you've announced today. But in the meantime, Bernice, I want to get up to date with the latest on the diplomacy side of things and get your reaction to this news conference we've had from the Chinese spokesperson about a joint declaration with the US. What do you make of this? What's been announced, and is it a breakthrough?
Look, it is obviously good that the 30 meetings or so that John Kerry and Xie Zhenhua had is bearing some fruit on the one side. On the other hand, the joint statement, the joint declaration, the details are still quite patchy at the moment, doesn't really mention finance, which is pretty poor considering that these are two largest major emitters in the world. Secondly, it is also good to see that it is also a bit challenging that they haven't really raised ambition yet, even though they're moving together, which is encouraging. And last but certainly not least, it's good to see that they mentioned methane and forest. And again, I haven't studied the detail because this is so new. But at the same time, I'm a bit disappointed that they didn't mention finance and that it is possible that it would take a while before the ratcheting up also happened as well.
Well, yes, but do you think it could make the difference between this summit being a success or not? After all, these are the world's two biggest polluters, and the fact that they appear to be working together in some way, is that the impetus that this summit needs?
I think it's a great thing to see that they have been working together. And at the time of the kind of domestic politics that we're seeing right now, moving together clearly is the only way forward. At the same time, for negotiators who have been blaming US-China geopolitical tension for not moving forward fast enough, they now don't have that excuse, since the two of them are saying that they are ready to move forward together.
And meanwhile, we've had the draft agreement published today, the first text that countries will work around and try to agree a form of words by the end. It's been criticised as not going far enough. Do you think that's fair?
Look, I mean, it is now, 6 p.m.? The delegations are going to meet now between now and 7 p.m. They will come back forward. They can come back with a stronger, more ambitious offer at the moment. There are some good things in there at the moment, in the sense that it mentioned fossil fuel for the first time. In Paris doesn't even mention it. It talks about subsidies removal for fossil fuels. Okay. It obviously needs to have more on finance, especially on adaptation.
I'm just going to interrupt you because I understand that the US climate envoy John Kerry is now about to speak. As we say, this joint declaration between China and the US. So there is the US climate envoy John Kerry. So let's listen in to this news conference.
As you now know, today the United States and China are releasing a joint declaration which lays out how we will limit warming on this planet and how together we'll take action here at the COP as well as in the years to come. President Biden had a conversation with President Xi a number of weeks ago in which both of the leaders expressed their hopes that despite areas of real difference, and we know there are, we could cooperate on the climate crisis. Now, the two largest economies in the world have agreed to work together to raise climate ambition in this decisive decade. My Chinese counterpart, Xie Zhenhua, whom you just heard from, he and I first talked in February after President Biden was sworn in. And our teams have worked together for months, meeting more than 30 times, both virtually and in person. And we have worked in good faith, and we found common ground, and we understand how important it is that we continue that work. So tonight, I am pleased to announce, on behalf of President Biden and Secretary Blinken, that we have agreed to a basic framework for this cooperation going forward. Our joint declaration builds on the statement that our governments released in April, which represented our first step. And at that time, we agreed on a number of actions in order to continue discussions to try to find a way to make progress. We also expressed a shared desire for success at this COP on mitigation, adaptation, support, and frankly, all of the key issues which will result in the world raising ambition and being able to address this crisis. Now, with this announcement, we've arrived at a new step, a roadmap for our present and future collaboration on this issue. First, this declaration includes strong statements about the alarming science, the emissions gap, and the urgent need to accelerate the action to close that gap. This is critical. We all have to be honest, both about the progress that we're seeing and the need to do more for the future. And we need to do it far faster in this decisive decade. Why? Not because the United States or China say that we must, but because the scientists say that we must. The effort to reduce emissions by 45% in this decade is a tall order, and it will require all of our nations coming together in order to achieve it. This declaration makes a statement about that effort to cooperate, about the imperative to cooperate. It declares specifically and identifies the need to accelerate the transition to a global net zero economy. Second, it commits to a series of important actions, not in the long term, not way out in the future, but now during this decade when it's needed. And I'm pleased to announce that we will work together to limit methane. Methane emissions, a greenhouse gas up to 80 times more destructive, more potent than CO2. The head of the IEA has made it clear that cutting methane emissions is the single fastest and most effective way to limit warming. And that's why it's been a top priority for President Biden and many of our partners here in Glasgow. Today, China has committed to develop by COP27 next year a comprehensive and ambitious national action plan on methane. And it will produce a significant effect on methane emissions control and reductions in this critical decade. The statement lays out important steps on CO2 emissions as well, including the need to accelerate using best efforts by all of us to phase down unabated coal in this decade as fast as is achievable. And we agreed on the need to enforce our respective laws on deforestation. Third, together we set out our support for a successful COP26, including certain elements that will promote ambition. But let me be clear, this declaration is a step that we can build on in order to help close the gap. You know the expression that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Well, every step matters right now, and we have a long journey ahead of us. So we have to mitigate faster. We have to cut methane emissions faster. We have to continue to raise ambition. And most of all, we have to take action in order to keep 1.5 degrees centigrade alive. That is why President Biden remains committed to working with our partners around the world, especially those that are on the front lines of climate impacts, the folks who are pushing for more ambition and more aggression in our targets. As I think you know, we, the United States, support the High Ambition Coalition, which, thanks to President Biden and Secretary Blinken, we have now, at this COP, proudly rejoined. And as I've said many times, the United States and China have no shortage of differences. But on climate, cooperation is the only way to get this job done. This is not a discretionary thing, frankly. This is science. It's math and physics that dictate the road that we have to travel. And we cannot reach our goals unless all of us work together. Every country, and China and the United States particularly, as the two largest emitters in the world, both have to help show the way. We need to raise ambition and we need to take action in this decisive decade. And this document repeats that several times over. So I look forward to stepping up our work with China and other nations and make the progress that we need to make in order to meet our responsibility, personal responsibility and governmental responsibility, but also for the fundamental reason that we have the opportunity to provide a cleaner, safer, healthier world for all of our citizens. And that is what this is really all about. So